And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. Certainly not a victorious one, as tonight the Purdue Boilermakers come into Bloomington and win 67 to 63. This is a game that Indiana controlled for the first 8 minutes, and from that point forward, this game was really played at Purdue's pace, and that ultimately is why Purdue won. I thought the Hoosiers came out and started the game out really well. Went on a nice little run there, got the 18-12 lead at the under 12-minute timeout, still up 20-14 at the under 8-minute timeout. But it was in that time period between the under 12-minute timeout and the under 8-minute timeout where the pace really slowed. It was 2-2 between those 4 minutes, and really Indiana was never able to speed it up after that. And Purdue played very physical. Indiana didn't necessarily answer the bell with the physicality, and ultimately weren't able to make enough plays at the end of the game to get over the Boilermakers. So we appreciate you joining us tonight on this episode of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I am joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. It's our usual crew. And the way we do this on this show is we typically start out with the banner moment, which is meant to be a positive, meant to be the sign that this team is on its way to its sixth banner. And I got to say, it's really hard to do on nights when the Hoosiers lose to Purdue, and they lose with such a lackluster effort from both the players on the court and the fans in the stands. Here's what I will say. There's one particular moment at the end of the game that I was impressed with, and it's when Indiana was down 56-54, and they were on a breakaway. James Blackman Jr. got a steal. He goes down, and he turns it over. It was a bad turnover, and Purdue goes down the other end and scores. So a game that could have been tied at 56 is now Purdue up 58-48 or 58-54. And on the next possession, Blackman gets the ball, shoots it, makes the three. And he didn't, with no hesitation. And I think, that showed the kind of attitude that he has, the kind of scorer's mentality he has to not get down by a bad play and be ready to make a big play on the next possession. And that was huge. And it put Indiana down one, put him in a position where on the next possession, Yogi, was able to make one free throw, miss the second. It's tied at 58. The momentum looked like it was back in our direction. Unfortunately, we weren't able to complete it. But I think, James Blackman did not play well against Purdue the first time out, did not play well at all in the first half. But I thought he came back and had a pretty good second half and ended up finishing with 14 points. And I was just impressed with his mentality in a game where Indiana was so just lethargic to look past the turnover on the previous possession, step up and make a three, and give his team a chance to win. So this is not going to be a game where it's real easy to find positives. So that's the one that sticks out to me. Hopefully we'll find some more as we go forward. But with that said, let me turn it over to my co-hosts, Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Let's get their opening thoughts on tonight's game. If you have questions, tweet them to us with the hashtag AssemblyCall. We'll get to them. But with that said, Andy, let's go to you first. Let's get your Bottoms line. And Ryan, we'll let your rant percolate here for a little bit.
Man, I feel kind of like you. I don't really know where to start, although I wasn't tasked with you by being unabashedly optimistic at the beginning of the show. So, I thought a couple things were the difference. To me, offensively, when IU really executed what they wanted to do, which was get into the lane, not force shots against Hammonds, and really look to pass instead of look to score when they got close to the rim, I thought they really got a lot of good shots. Now, there were certainly stretches where Purdue played great defense, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But the stretches of this game where it really got away from IU and they fell behind by, I think 8 was the largest deficit, was when they really got away from that and went back to the things that didn't work for them at all in the first game and really challenged Hammonds, and he blocked some shots and forced some, one stretch where there was just a couple shots that weren't blocked but were just horrific. I know Robert Johnson took the second of those. I forget who took the first, but I thought that when they executed well offensively, they scored pretty well. And I would guess, I don't know what the final per possession numbers were, but it couldn't have been.
Don't look. It's bad.
Okay.
Just don't look.
All right. Apparently not as good as I thought, but. So I thought that offensively was a big difference. I mean, it was pretty clear to see what they were doing when the offense was clicking and what was going on when they weren't. And obviously with this team not making threes for the better part of 20 minutes in a row, it is certainly problematic. But, the that was one factor. The other was defensively. I mean, certainly in the second half. Why Purdue shot 18 threes in this game, I have absolutely no idea. But this could have been a double-digit game had they gone inside. I mean, they shot 65% on two-pointers, and there were times it felt like more. They had 15 offensive rebounds. I thought, definitely a game, and maybe in comparison to some other teams IU's played this year with some size, where they just relentlessly went to the advantage they had. I guess I shouldn't say relentlessly. They took 18 terrible shots, which were, if I was Painter, I would have yanked anybody off the floor that shot a three without getting it into Hammonds. But, and those really kept IU in the game, I thought, at points when they did get away from Hammonds and Haas in stretches. I thought those were really the two things that IU just had no answer defensively, whether it be personnel or schematically, just didn't have an answer there. So I think those are kind of pick one thing on either end of the floor, and how it unraveled those would be what I would pick.
Ryan, your rant to get us going.
Well, first, since you were remiss in your duty, I want to welcome everybody to Dan Dokic's favorite Indiana postgame show. The key tonight.
By the way, it's $10 to keep watching after the first.
Yeah, make sure you make that check out to Ryan Phillips. That's 2 L's. Tonight the difference was the rebounding. Purdue had 39, Indiana 24. We said it the first time we faced Purdue. I thought that we lacked effort in that game. I don't think there was a lack of effort tonight. It was maybe a lack of intelligence on the offensive end and defensively. But I thought some of the guys worked really hard in the post. I thought Hartman did what he could against Hammonds, and I thought that Stan Robinson did a fantastic job when he was in there on Hammonds. You can't overcome that size discrepancy. And Perea, I thought when he was in the first half, played very well, but had 2 cheap fouls called on him, left the game, came in the second half and tried, but it just wasn't the same. I mean, had he stayed in the first half with the momentum he had to his game, I don't know what happens. He had 2 very cheap fouls called on him. Hammonds and Haas are very handsy, push-offy post guys, and they've gotten away with it all year, so I guess that's not a foul anymore in the Big Ten. You got to adjust to it, and there's nothing you can really do about it because you can't complain about it because clearly it's not a foul. If no matter what the rules say, it's not a foul if the officials aren't going to call it. So Haas and Hammonds got away with a lot of stuff, but if that's the way it's going to be called, that's the way it's going to be called. Frank Kaminsky gets away with a lot as well. It's just something you got to deal with, and tonight Indiana couldn't deal with it. I thought there was a good effort for most of the night. I thought we were, as Andy said, lackadaisical for stretches, but I thought overall the effort was fine. But you can't bury yourself that much in the post and come away with nothing. Missed too many free throw opportunities. Against a team like Purdue, you can't miss 6 free throws and expect to win. You got to hit those, and Indiana is capable of doing that. So there were positives. I thought that the ball movement early and the ball movement at some points in the second half were very good, but it wasn't enough to overcome Purdue. And you've got to make easy shots, and you've got to make your free throws if you're going to beat a team with that big an advantage on the interior.
Probably the biggest positive to come out of this is that we don't have to play Purdue again. I mean, it sucks when your biggest rival is probably the worst matchup for you on your schedule, but that's the reality of this, and it's been proven because, Indiana didn't make enough adjustments from that first game to be able to win this. And again, fortunately, we don't have to see them on the schedule again. And maybe we play them in the Big Ten tournament, whatever. But I thought, I was wrong on the Minnesota game, and that I thought that was going to be a closer game, and a lot of people predicted a blowout, and they were right. And tonight, I thought this was going to be a really close game. I didn't think we were going to lose it, but I thought this was going to be a close game and a tough one for us to win. And I thought that if Purdue stuck with throwing it inside, which they, people forget they didn't do that the first time up in Mackey. I mean, Hammonds and Haas didn't score that many points. We just let them drive all over the place. Tonight, they just kept getting it inside, and Andy's right. I mean, fortunately, they shot enough threes to kind of keep us in it. But, Ryan, you mentioned something about the effort being okay, and let's talk about that real quick because a lot of people, I think, will disagree with you. And, it's hard in a game like this because I thought to start, we came out and played well. It's not like we weren't ready to play. We came out and played well. But, Purdue did a good job of playing physical on defense, of switching on screens, of making it hard for us to do what we wanted to do. And I thought that made it look like we weren't playing as hard as we were because they made us think more. And they just, we didn't play that same kind of just attacking offense we're used to seeing. And so I feel like it looks like we're not playing as hard as really we are, which really, you hate to do it, but that's kind of a credit to them for coming in with a great game plan, staying physical, and sticking to what they wanted to do. And, you said what your piece. Andy, I want to know what you think about that, and then Ryan, come in and chime in. And, if you have thoughts on this, send it to the #AssemblyCall, because there's clearly a wide discrepancy on this. I didn't think the guys weren't playing hard, but I thought Purdue made us tentative. And there's a difference between tentative and playing hard. Like, I thought we were ready. I thought we played hard. But, we just didn't have that extra gear because we didn't adjust enough to what they were doing. Fair assessment?
I think that's fair. I mean, to me, I think it's a little bit the difference between hard and smart. I mean, there were certainly some times when maybe you could ask for a little bit more from a couple guys, but I thought in general, I mean, the guys that played Hammonds and Haas down low, I mean, you had guys really battling, so you can fault them for being in the wrong position, and you can fault them for not putting up enough resistance. But I guess to me that there's a difference between playing hard. I mean, Hartman is just battling like crazy down there. Holt was doing the same thing, and it was a physical game. Perea was, and Stan Robinson, and they're doing that. To me, I look at those things and say those guys are playing hard. Now, you look at some of the other decisions in terms of what they were doing and how they were playing them, and allowing themselves to get pinned on one side or the other, or were they trying to front in some cases and not in others when there's no help to be had. You can get upset about those things and some of the dribble penetration and things like that. That's fair, but those are also things that we've seen pretty much all season. So I thought there were turnovers at times, even though there was only 10 for the game. There were some really inopportune ones. I felt like when they did come, it was at critical junctures where guys saw an opening and just tried to do too much. You got Troy shooting a three from the baseline into the side of the backboard somehow. Just getting caught up in, I have to make a play. And I think that speaks a little bit to what you said, where, when the openings were there, IU felt like they had to take advantage, which is true, but I think at times guys did too much trying to dribble through traffic. I feel like a lot of the turnovers were from activity like that and not necessarily carelessness, I guess, as we've seen some of the other times. So I think there's probably, bits and pieces where maybe you can question the effort, but I really thought it was more, the making smart plays, positioning-wise, defensively. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of the defensive stuff later, but I thought it was things like that were more of a factor than flat-out effort.
I've got in my notes that play summed up the game for me, which is we're down 4, we're on a fast break. We passed up 3 good looks for 3 from good shooters to get it to Troy in the corner, and he shot it and hit it off the side of the backboard. Coming off a game where he was 2 for 2. And I get, Troy's trying to make a play, and I thought Troy was pretty active and despite some bad decisions did some good things tonight, but I just thought that summed it up, where guys were by that point in the game, we're overthinking it a little bit, we're passing up good shots, and we take the worst one of the bunch and we hit it off the side of the backboard. So, Ryan, what do you want to say about the effort?
I thought the effort was there. I think that there are just things this team has limitations, and it couldn't overcome those limitations against Purdue. It couldn't overcome them against Wisconsin either. I think that the effort was there. The problem is, as you guys said, they just started. It was almost like the size difference was in their head, and every time they did something, they had to try and make a play, but I got to make a play without going into the post because that guy's going to block my shot. And the way you defeat a shot blocker is you do one of two things. You either go right at him, into his chest, ball fake him, get him in the air, make him swing. Hammonds is not that good. I'm sorry. He is a nice Big Ten player, but it's not like this guy is an all-American superstar going to destroy you no matter who you are. He's a guy who picks on teams without much size, and that's what he did tonight. And he's not extremely disciplined when he goes for block shots. If you go at him, you ball fake, get him in the air, make something happen, you can get him to get into foul trouble. You can clearly rile him up and get him ticked off or get him over exuberant. Got a technical on him tonight because he dunked over Hunter and James Blackman, which isn't that big an achievement. He felt the need to puff his chest out and whoop it up, and that was just stupid. So I think the problem with Indiana here is that they overthought it maybe a little bit too much. I mean, you either go right at the guy or you get him out of the paint on screens and things like that. and look to shoot from the outside. And I think Indiana just, you had guys like Troy trying to do far too much.
So, all right, Andy, let's talk about the defense. You alluded to it. Once again, and I don't know how many straight games this has been a trend, but certainly if you've been watching the Assembly Call, and if you're subscribed to the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, so you get our post-game emails, you realize this has been a trend that Indiana's first half defense has been really good, where almost every single game that I can remember, we're holding teams to under their season average in the first half. Tonight, Purdue scores 0.91 points per possession. Now, the thing is, tonight I think it was a little bit of fool's gold because part of that was just how much they slowed down the game. But even in a slowed down game, it's points per possession, so you still have to get a stop in the possession. And, Indiana holds Purdue to 0.91 points per possession, which is good for anybody, especially good for this team. But then in the second half, Indiana's defense, falters some. In large part, I think, because of the rebounds and giving up 14 offensive rebounds, and Purdue ends up scoring 1.09 points per possession. So, Andy, let's talk about the defense, because I thought what made Indiana really effective early was that whether it was Hunter or whether it was Colin Hartman or even Stan Robinson, whoever was down there playing A.J. Hammonds, we were fronting him, and then a lot of times the guy who was guarding the player on in the opposite corner on the opposite wing was sagging back and making it really hard for Purdue to throw that lob pass. And I thought, for whatever reason, and maybe you saw this, I didn't quite catch it, what adjustment did Purdue make in the second half that allowed them to make the entry passes easier? Because I thought we were preventing them from making the entry passes early and getting position on the block. Because when they got position on the block in the first half, they were scoring, but we weren't able to do that as much in the second half. What was the difference?
Well, I have to give credit to our number one fan, Dan Dockage, for this. He pointed this out on Twitter, actually, that Purdue was doing a lot of entries from the top of the key where there really wasn't a clear way to bring another defender into the picture. So even if they angled it a little bit to one side of the basket, there really wasn't a great way to give help. And I definitely think that was one of the factors. I thought IU in the second half, it felt like more started trying to switch up defenses. They played that 1-3-1 a couple possessions. Nearly got Colin Hartman killed. They were switching defenses and possessions again, and I have no idea what that is. There was one time where it seemed like they switched, but it appears half the guys are playing man, half are playing zone, and it switched in a way that Yogi is the center man on the back line of a 2-3 zone when it happened, and it just I really don't understand doing that. It feels like getting too gimmicky when this team can't master the fundamentals defensively. So if you show me that this team can contain somebody off the dribble, then fine. Work on things like that. Or if you want to play zone and try to force Purdue to shoot threes, and pack it in and make it hard for them to get the ball. They were 2 of 18 from 3, and surely if you really pack in a zone, they're going to make some. But if you're trying not to just get crushed in the paint, that to me was the way to go. But don't do it in the middle of a possession when you've got guys who have no idea what defense you're playing. It felt like it even eventually switched back to man because they didn't know where they were supposed to be. So that's, I guess, if there's anything about the defensive, strategy, game plan, whatever you want to say, that continues to frustrate me outside of, just some of the basic, dribble, inability to contain the dribble and things like that. It's these switching defenses because it confuses IU infinitely more than it confuses the opponent. At least it feels that way. And
there was
the other thing is, I thought
James
Purdue
Blackman
was
Jr.
just
didn't know what we were doing, and Troy had to yank him by his shorts into the zone.
Yeah, there was that. And I thought in the second half Purdue did a lot better job of not falling into shooting threes. They shot a few in the second half, but I think they might have only shot 5 or 6. And so, I think they did a much better job of really staying with the game plan and really just hammering it inside as well. IU didn't really have any answers. I don't feel like IU tried a lot of double teams on the catch where they would play a guy behind Hammonds or Haas and try to run somebody else at him that way. I thought they tried more to front, and I thought, again, make those guys try to make a decision and make a pass out of a quick double team. Didn't really see that. So that, if you're looking at changes, I'd like to see a change like that as opposed to let's try to play multiple defenses in the same possession.
Yeah,
we
I
may
think
have Ryan, real quick. We may have buried the lead, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But after you talk about the defense, go ahead.
I want to say about the defense. Sometimes that's an on-court thing. I mean, Crean can yell it out, but if guys don't communicate, then that's how you end up having some guys playing zone, some guys playing man. It's all about communication from those leaders on the floor, like Yogi and guys like that. Need to make sure that it's a solid situation and make sure that everybody is on the same page. And that clearly wasn't happening tonight, especially in the second half, I thought.
So, Andy, you tweeted something out that's interesting, and we're starting to see a few people comment on this. We've talked a lot this season about how important the bench is for this team. And Indiana made a change in the starting lineup tonight. Hunter Mosquera-Perea came in, and if you listen to the pregame comments of Tom Crean, he said that Hunter had practiced really well, and if Hunter plays like he practices, we're going to be okay. And he inserted Hunter in the starting lineup, and Hunter went out and scored 8 points before most IU fans were in their seats with an offensive array that would have made Kevin Garnett and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar proud, hook shots and jump shots. I mean, he played really well. And frankly, we've seen this from Hunter before, where he's come out in the first half and played really well. So that's not necessarily new. But what really hurt Indiana tonight was getting no production from the bench. I mean, you look at it, Stanford Robinson scored 2 points. That's it for the bench production. I mean, that was it. Indiana scores 2 points from the bench. Colin Hartman doesn't score. Nick Zeisloff got in, didn't score. Emmett Holt, Max Hotzel. So, I thought I was really enthused about Hunter coming back in and starting. Number one, because I figured that he could D up A.J. Hammonds, and number two, because I thought Colin Hartman coming in off the bench would really kind of reinvigorate that bench production, and we just got nothing. Now, it's not all points that dictates how well a bench plays, because I thought actually in the first half, Colin and Stan did some nice things, defensively and some non-scoring things. But in the second half, those things weren't really there, and there was just nothing. And, you look at a 4-point loss, and, you kind of look to the margins. Why do you lose a game like this? This is the type of game that you want to squeak out like Indiana did against Michigan a few games ago. Well, when you shoot 10 of 16 from the line, when your bench scores 2 points, when you get out rebounded, you start adding these things up, and you kind of feel lucky that you only lose by 4. But, I really thought that the bench not being able to do anything really hurt, because Yogi scores 21, Blackman gets his 14, Troy scores 14 and 7. They didn't have their best games, but they produced while they were out there, and I just think the bench has been so important for this team that not having them tonight really hurt. Ryan, what and let me throw my hypothesis out real quick and tell me if you think this is crazy. Because I thought Indiana played well early, like I said, but by the time the bench started coming in, the pace of the game had changed to Purdue's pace. So our bench guys were coming into a game they're not used to playing in, because it's not the fast, up-tempo attacking game it's been, because Purdue has changed the pace, and I just thought they were never able to find their way.
I thought the pace changed right when Perea went out with his second foul. I thought that was when it shifted. Hartman came in. Well, it had nothing to do with the substitution. It just was when Purdue started getting what it wanted out of the game. And I thought through most of the first half, I felt pretty confident that Indiana was going to win this game. I thought that Purdue wasn't adjusting well to what Indiana was doing. It wasn't high scoring, but it seemed that Indiana could get up to its pace when it wanted to. On a few possessions and things, they were able to run out and get some stuff off the break. But the second half was just a mishmash of things that we don't do well, and that's half-court offense, slowing things down, and trying to defend off the dribble and defend the post. And you've got guys like Hotzel and Holt and Stan Robinson coming in who aren't really going to add a whole lot to the offense, and they just didn't. And that's really what you expect. And Nick Zeisloff couldn't get open looks at 3, so I thought defensively, Hartman and Robinson and Holt played really hard. That's all you can really expect from them in a game like this, because I didn't think it fit their style at all, as you said. I think Holt's at his best when he's running the floor and getting passes ahead, or when guys help off a drive and he's open for a 2-foot layup or a putback or something like that. He's not a guy who's going to excel in a half-court offense game. So again, these guys played hard. It wasn't their style of game, as you said, and it didn't fit well, and it really played into Purdue's hands.
Andy, you want to talk bench at all?
I saw a question come through and somebody asked about Stan's minutes, so I guess maybe I'll try to answer that at the same time. I actually thought in the first half particularly, I thought he played really well. I thought you found him not taking shots that a few games ago he definitely would have tried to force. And so I thought that was a positive for him. And I thought, like I said, he really battled against Hammonds defensively. I would argue he did about as well as anybody, quite frankly. I'm not really sure what that says about the other guys, but I did think he played pretty well. I mean, he missed those couple free throws. That was kind of the beginning of that trend, unfortunately, over the course of the game. But I just thought, yeah, I mean, somebody else made the comment of the 2 rebounds between Honor, Holt, and Hartman. And I thought, again, it was a game where Hartman, he really becomes most valuable if he's able to step out and hit threes and pull, big guys away from the basket. And he didn't even shoot a 3 tonight, or he shot 1. Probably one of the lower numbers he's taken recently, as I can recall. And I just thought, other than defensively, maybe that just took too much out of him, and he really couldn't give a whole lot. Zaislov didn't take any shots. Hotzel seemed like kind of an odd substitution at the time in the second half, and didn't really, put up any stats. And I think it just, I feel like a broken record on this, but IU just doesn't have that much margin for error because the defense is so bad. And so, even though they only had 10 turnovers, you miss 6 free throws, you don't get anything out of the bench, and that's the kind of thing that's going to get this team beat against another team who, really has an advantage and utilize that over them. So I don't know if there's too much to say that you guys didn't touch on already, but certainly, not a great matchup for a lot of these guys, but, Zaislov, it felt like, when they were really moving the ball, was there opportunities that he could have gotten himself open for threes. But I haven't seen the minutes, but I don't feel like he even played a ton of minutes either. And I think with him, defense is such a challenge that you kind of, if you're playing him, you're exaggerating an already bad defense. So if, he's not looking to shoot, can't get open for shots, then it's a hard argument to play him considerable minutes.
Yeah, I thought the Holtzel substitution was in part because, while I think the guys came to play, I did think there was a stretch at the start of the second half where their level of competing didn't quite match Purdue's. And that's why Purdue jumped out to that 12-6 run. They were just a half step quicker to everything, and they jumped out. And, there's a couple interesting comments as we look at what the players are saying here, and some of the IU guys, some of the IU beat writers who were there. Number one, I want to get your guys' thoughts on both of these. Yogi Ferrell's saying at the end of the day, our fight didn't match theirs. And, if your leader is saying that, then maybe there is something to that. I still think part of that was that, Purdue took us out of what we wanted to do. But, when Yogi's saying that, I think you have to respect what he's saying, and maybe that's the feeling inside the locker room. And he also said about that last shot that it was a bad shot. When he chucked that shot up with about 5-6 seconds left, I have in my notes, Yogi takes 3 a little early. And it's Yogi. It's a shot that he can make. And I'm not going to second-guess it too much, but, maybe if he takes another dribble, maybe if you get a better look, I think he's earned the right to get the benefit of the doubt in that situation. But I think it's also a good sign that he looks at it and says, that was a bad shot. And you can tell from his reaction that he thought that. Let's use that as a lead and talk about him individually. And Ryan, I'll go to you first. Because again, this was another game where he leads us in scoring, he leads us in shots, and we lose. But for the most part, that last shot notwithstanding, I thought he kind of took it upon himself in a game when some other guys weren't necessarily matching the physicality and the competition level to try and do something. And that's going to lead to some forced shots. But I hesitate to put any blame on him. 21 points, 4 assists. Now, granted, 3 of those assists were basically in the first 4 minutes of the game. 5 rebounds, a steal. By no means a perfect game from him. But, I think, again, his willingness to fight kept this team in a game when they weren't always, even though they played hard, there's a difference between playing hard and stepping up to the full challenge the opponent's giving you. And I thought he did that, but, a lot of guys, maybe we'll talk about Robert Johnson, a lot of guys didn't step up quite like he did. So your thoughts on Yogi, Ryan?
Again, he's our best player, and he's a 3-year starter. And that shot at the end was not the shot I would have picked. But at this point, when Yogi feels like he's got to look, I'm fine with him taking it. It's just the way it is right now. If you're Tom Crean, it may not be a great shot, and it probably wasn't, and he had more time, and he could have done something else, and we were only down 2. Maybe you go for 2, maybe you try and get fouled. I don't know, drive-in, kick, whatever. But if you said before that possession you're going to have the ball in your best player's hands and let him make a decision, I think most people are okay with that, especially with Yogi because he's a 3-year guy, and he's been in these situations before. He didn't make it. It's fine. But he shouldn't feel bad about his game because he missed that shot. I thought he played very well. I thought down the stretch he made some excellent plays that kept us in the game. He continued his 3-point streak, but I thought that in a game where he is really out of place with the size of the guys on the other team and how they play defense, I thought he fought through it and played very well. He is the engine on this team that goes. If you want to look at the problems tonight, Robert Johnson offensively was pretty bad. He's a freshman. He's going to be in games like this a lot, and he'll get better. But he didn't play well. You've got other guys who didn't look good for long stretches of the games. James Blackman Jr. didn't look good in stretches of this game. So if you really have to point out something that's wrong, you're not looking at Yogi. You're looking at the other guys, because I thought Yogi might have made a bad play or two, but overall he was the reason we were in this game at the end.
You bring up something interesting. Andy, feel free to jump in on Yogi if you want to, but, when you talk about James and Robert, I thought, James Blackman Jr. came out, knocks down the first 3 of the game, and I thought he was going to have a really big game because he shot so well at home. I thought he'd be ready to come back after playing a bad game against Purdue, and then he disappeared for a while. But I thought he adjusted to the physicality of the game in the second half and made some plays late, and he drove and he got fouled and he got knocked to the ground, and it wasn't a perfect game by any means, but I was impressed. That's a game to me that he, just even as recently as a few weeks ago, gets taken out of the game and doesn't come back. And I thought he showed a little intestinal fortitude to come back and say, hey, I'm going to step up and make a play. And I'm surprised that Robert Johnson didn't, because he's a guy that has that reputation of being a more physical player, being a guy who more impacts the game on defense, and it's not about his scoring. But I thought, he went 1 for 8. And he did have 4 assists, so he made some plays, especially at the start of the second half. But he never quite got into the game, and I didn't quite understand that. I was proud to see that from James. A little disappointed to see Robert never find his footing in the game. So anyway, Andy, there's a smorgasbord of topics. Pick whichever one you'd like to address.
Let me jump in on this real quick. I want to clarify.
Or Ryan, jump in. Like
I just want to clarify what I was saying. I thought James Blackman Jr. did step up late and really got back into the game, but for a long stretch there, he was completely out of it. He had a couple threes where he didn't even follow through on them.
But that's what I mean. But he came back at the end, and I was impressed with that.
And Robert, I thought, played pretty solid defense throughout. He had a couple where he closed out too hard on guys and they drove right by him. But I thought for the most part he played pretty well defensively. His offensive game right now is just in a slump. He's just in a offensive slump. And aside from, I guess it was Minnesota where he hit a couple threes, he really has been struggling offensively, and that showed tonight. Again, he tried to attack Hammonds a few times too, and that happened in the first game at Purdue, and he didn't learn his lesson.
Andy, we'll mute ourselves. You're up.
No, it's fine. To start with Yogi, I really thought that he seemed like the only guy who, when he did get in the lane, he knew what he wanted to do. I felt like there were a lot of times when other guys would get in there because that was clearly the plan. But then when they got there, if they weren't going to shoot, as they didn't for stretches in the first half, they didn't really have a good idea of what they wanted to do. So even Yogi, a couple times in the second half, he would get in, but he'd find Troy coming down the lane. And was able to find other players in a way that Blackman and Robert Johnson weren't when they did get into the lane. And I thought, quite honestly, I don't remember, and I probably look at this a little bit later, but I mean he was the only guy making plays down the stretch. I mean there was Blackman hit that 3, but other than that, I mean I felt like pretty much every key basket that was scored was a result of Yogi or something he did or somebody he set up. So. And even in stretches when he was out of the game, you could just tell things just kind of ground to a halt. And it really underscores his importance for the team when you see in a game tonight against a good defense what they look like when he wasn't on the floor. And so, yeah, the last shot seemed quick. I thought it was a case of, do you do something like against Maryland where you get a ball screen to create a little bit of extra space for him? I think he just didn't have a great understanding of how much time was left, and he seemed to say as much after the game. It's also a case where, IU's got timeouts left at that point. Do you take a timeout and set something up if you're worried that he's, going to do something? I ultimately don't have a problem with the shot. He was the guy that carried him, really got him back in the game, and, was it a little bit quick? Sure, but I guess I don't ultimately have an issue with it. I really don't know that I have too much different to say than you guys did on Blackman and Robert Johnson. I thought Blackman at least did a pretty good job. There was a couple stretches where, he forced things a little bit. There was a shot when they were, the offense was struggling. They had run the shot clock down a couple of times. He took a quick shot in the first half that, was one of those shooting for the sake of shooting moments. And then the part you talked about earlier where he, made that turnover trying to do too much late and then, kind of bounced back and hit the three. I thought overall, offensively, he wasn't too bad. And I think, to Ryan's point, Johnson seems to be struggling. And I think ways that he is often able to get himself going is going toward the basket, and that really got taken away from him tonight. The only basket he hit was a wide open layup off a turnover, and so I thought he seemed hesitant, from the 3-point line on a couple occasions, and defensively contributed a bit, but overall was probably one of his. I don't know. It's just a game when he seemed less confident than he does. I think that's one of the things that we've kind of remarked about him over the course of the season is that, for a freshman who may not have been as highly rated as Blackman, that he has a lot of confidence and is able to has really made some key plays for IU over the course of the season in big spots. And I thought tonight just didn't, for whatever reason, seem to have that confidence. Maybe you attribute that to the shot blocking inside and not being able to get easy baskets to get him going, but didn't really seem like quite the same guy we've seen at times over the course of the season.
Yeah, and disappointing. I mean, I feel like the Purdue matchup should be one that he thrives in more than struggles in, but that's not the case. All right, so let's talk about Crean real quick before we move on to some other things. I don't know if this is just the Dockich effect of new Twitter followers that we have after this week, but there's a lot more profanity in my feed tonight with people, not happy with things, and so I guess. As our audience grows, which is, hey, great, and we appreciate it, everybody who's here, there's a lot more people who, want me to take some comments and shove them, anything having to do with positivity. Let's talk about the Crean thing real quick. Look, you lose at home to your rival, never a good thing for you as a coach, and certainly there were some adjustments that didn't get made, and I thought Purdue stuck to their game plan better than Indiana did. But I think when you look at this, Indiana's sitting at 8-5 going into this game, and we've said, most of the computer models predict Indiana to finish 11-7, even though they have a win probability of greater than 50% on all of these games. So the probability was that Indiana was going to lose one or two of these upcoming games. And frankly, if you had made me pick which one it would be, this is the one that I felt the most scared about, was this one, even though it's at home. I did a radio spot in Fort Wayne earlier today, and I thought it would be close, and I said if Purdue stuck to their game plan and got it inside more than they did up in West Lafayette, it was going to be really hard for us to win, and that's what happened. So I know people want to sound the alarm sirens and get all crazy and do the fire Crean stuff because we lost to Purdue, and I'm disappointed. I hate losing to Purdue. It sucks. I'm sorry. I'm not going to indulge all of that right now when the season has been really good to this point and can still be good, because I just think this is a real crappy matchup for us. And I know all the other things that we've talked about, but I just think good. We're done with this. Our team this season was not ready to beat their team this season, and kudos to them. Take your bragging rights. I'm not going to sit here and hang anybody in effigy for this game. Now, we go and lose to Rutgers and we struggle against Northwestern, the season starts to fall apart, fine. But I'm just not going to get that concerned. Either one of you, if you have harsh criticisms for the coach and want to go off on a rant, Ryan has unmuted himself. So he's ready
I'm
to
taking
speak.
this. You know my relationship with the fans. Come on now.
Let's give him the floor.
I love these people. They're my favorite because they give me a reason to get up in the morning to yell at them. Was it Crean's best game as a coach? No. I mean, come on. There were obvious issues with the way this game played out. But look at the entire season as a whole. Purdue is a terrible matchup for Indiana. right now. Terrible. Remember a couple years ago when we had that amazing team that was number one for pretty much the entire year, and I said the one team I didn't want to play was Syracuse? This is the same kind of thing. It's just they have talent where we don't, and they can exploit it in a way that we can't exploit our advantages. And give Purdue credit. They played very good defense tonight, as Andy has repeatedly said. They played very well off the ball and on the ball, and A.J. Hammonds did what he does in the middle, and that's basically stand there and be a roadblock. And, again, if Indiana does what it's supposed to do these last few weeks, we'll feel fine about this season. You go to Rutgers, that should be a win. You go to Northwestern, that should be a win. At home against Iowa, Iowa's had some nice games this year, but I just don't think they're very good. And then Michigan State, the last game of the year. That game could go either way, but I feel good about it right now. That's 4 more wins. This was a tough game. As Jerod said, if you had to pick one of the last 5 games, which one do you feel least confident about? I think all of us would have picked Purdue just because of the advantages they have. Now, can those advantages be overcome? Yes, but it's very difficult, and you have to almost play a perfect game to beat that kind of disadvantage. And Indiana didn't play close to a perfect game tonight. If three-pointers are falling, Indiana makes 10 to 12 three-pointers and doesn't have the foul trouble it had early in the first half, maybe that's an easy cruising win. But that's not what happened. That's not how this game played out. So, people want to – I think with Indiana fans, since a certain elderly coach left, they want to look for a reason to climb up on the cliff and jump off at any sign of trouble. The problem is you can't do that because you'll drive yourself insane. If they want to be insane, that's completely fine. I'm just saying you're sending yourself in that direction, and it's completely self-inflicted.
Dude, Branch from Kraken references are just way out of bounds tonight.
The guy has the court named after him. You got to say it at some point.
Andy, do you have any? You look like your head was in your hands there for a while. I don't know if your screen froze, if you were just really sad there for a bit.
No, I'd fire everybody. Screw it. What are you? No, I'm just kidding. For whatever. I mean, I'm sure I'm clearly the one who's most expected to, if any of us is going to take shots at Crean here. I mean, to me, I think any of it is kind of really silly to talk about until after the season anyway. I mean, nothing's going to change right now. So the other reality is, I mean, are there things that I thought could have been done differently tonight? Yeah. I mean, I thought the defense, what adjustments were made were poor. If you want to do something different, I would have been more of the opinion that, Minnesota forced Purdue into a ton of turnovers when they played, and even IU forced a fair amount of turnovers tonight, without pressing and things like that. When Octius goes out of the game, do you just press the hell out of these guys because now they have guys who aren't as comfortable handling the ball and things like that? I mean, those are adjustments that I would consider doubling the post in a different way. Does that end up making a difference? Do you just free up other guys for wide open shots? Maybe you do. Do you give up easy transition baskets if you try to press somebody? Maybe you do, but you're giving up easy baskets anyway, quite honestly. So, those I think to me are things that I would look at and say, and kind of question. But at the same time, I mean, you guys are right. It's not a great matchup. The personnel is what it is, and you can hang that on Crean, and that's fair. But that doesn't really change a whole lot at this point about anything that's happened so far this season or what's going on. So to me, I think it's kind of silly as well. We could sit here and I could certainly point out things that I didn't agree with from a coaching standpoint. I'm also not convinced that those things lost IU the game either, because despite whatever I would say wasn't done, at least to my standards, hopes, whatever you want to say. I mean, you make free throws in part of this game and you win, or you're tied and you go to overtime. You make open shots and you win the game. So I don't know. I think it's the easy thing to do. I feel like it's becoming like the next major sport. Indiana is like just turning everything into that, and I guess I don't. At this point, you can pick them apart after every loss if you want, and there certainly will be ways to do that. But I guess it ultimately, for me, at this point of this season, I don't know what that gets you. It doesn't make me feel any better about losing to Purdue to say, wow, I really wish we'd done something better defensively. This guy sucks. I mean, to me, you can sit here and do that after any game, after any loss, and it really doesn't. I don't know. To me, it doesn't change anything. He's who we have for now. Team has to figure out how to bounce back from this. I don't. There'll be plenty of time to talk about it after the season. there's a lot of ways that things could go from here on out. And I don't know. It's its own like cottage industry at this point, is the Korean bashing, I guess. So.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was your post-loss vote of confidence from Andy Bottoms. He's who we have for now. Would the Tom Crean fan club spokesman like to chime in here?
He should put Tom Crean, when he writes a book, should put that on the back cover as an endorsement. Andy Bottoms, the assembly call. He's what we have for now.
Hey, it's better than trashing him. I don't know.
Nothing helps to overcome a bad loss like a good belly laugh. That was great. Thanks, guys. Hey, we had someone tweet us that Jeremiah April should have played, so we had that tonight. I mean, that's where we were after this game.
Get off, Jeremiah April!
Dude, but the turnaround jump shot versus Mississippi Valley State. I'm telling you.
And ultimately, I mean, isn't it really Crean's fault that April's even on this roster and unable to compete? I mean, I think that's really where the blame for this needs to fall.
Where do we go from here? A couple quick comments from our loyal audience members. You know, it's amazing. I actually thought, Heather and I were talking about, what the attendance would be like for tonight's game, and I was like, it's IU Purdue. If we lose a close one, if we get blown out, if we blow them out, if we win close, it's going to be crazy. But we actually haven't had very much activity either on the YouTube page or from the Twitter comments. Our buddy Brian Tonsony says, I believe veterans on the other team played better than our inexperienced freshmen. Very true. That certainly happened. Andy Miller says 10 of 16 from the free throw line. That certainly didn't help. So, again, missing the front end of a few 1-on-1s, there's your game, and that is true. All right, so let's talk
10 of 16 is really more
10
like
of 16
10 of
is big.
10. It's more like 10 of 18 or 20 because, like you said, they miss front ends, so you don't even get the second shot.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. It's kind of the elephant in the room, and let's at least bring it up, which is the crowd. Now, some people, don't like to read full tweets or read entire streams in context, and thought that I was blaming the crowd for the loss tonight, which I never was. However, after Yogi took his ill-advised three, which he admitted, and missed it, there were some boos that rained down. And all I said was, this crowd hasn't cheered hard enough tonight to earn the right to boo. Now, I should have prefaced that with saying I never think booing your own team is good. I just don't believe in it. And you are free to disagree with that. That is totally an opinion thing. I realize that's just my opinion. So I realize there's going to be booing. But I also think as a crowd, if you're going to boo, you better cheer your ass off during other points in the game. And now look, none of us were there. We were all watching on TV. I was disappointed in the crowd. Just kind of what I heard, what you see, that didn't seem like an Indiana versus Purdue crowd to me. And I get that part of it was Purdue taking us out of our game and the guys not fighting quite as much as you would hope and just not as many big plays. And then the crowd doesn't get into it and the guys don't get into it. And it's this big chicken and egg thing and it all fed on itself. And by the 4-minute mark, we're down by 4. And I'm saying, man, this is a weird feeling game. It just feels weird. We're not into it. The crowd's not into it. And I guess, credit to Purdue for creating that. But do you guys have any thoughts on that? Because, I don't know, people don't seem to agree with some of my thoughts on it, but I'm not a guy who thinks you boo your own team, and I have high standards for an IU crowd because I remember what I was like when I was a student, and I remember what it was like for games like Kentucky and even just Maryland earlier this year, and I just didn't feel that tonight, and I don't quite understand it. Ryan, you want to go? Andy's got his head in his hands over here.
No, I don't. You must be looking at just a permanent picture of me with my head in my hands. I would agree with you. I definitely didn't get the same vibe as you did from like a Maryland game. I mean, I thought that was just crazy. And I know there's kind of the joke about ranked teams coming in, they don't have a number in front of their name, whatever. I mean, when you look back to what it felt like that Maryland crowd was like over the course of that game, and obviously there's more to get excited about in that game because they're shooting threes and they're doing all those things and a lot of big plays to get them in the game. But I definitely didn't feel that tonight. I mean, down the stretch, yeah, when they started to make plays and close the gap a little bit, you heard it. But I definitely didn't feel like it was the kind of crowd that we've seen even at other games this season. Even the SMU, I thought it was pretty good generally, and some of the other bigger teams have come in. So I definitely for this game, you can't get excited about this game. Then I don't know. I'm sure this will somehow transition into too many East Coast people being at IU or something like that. But and the booing at the end. I mean, I guess again, I'm kind of in your camp. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I haven't sat at many an IU football game and rained a few boos down on some of the coaching and things that have gone on in that scenario. But I guess at that point, to me, it has to feel like, all right, if that's the case, you're booing Yogi, which is about the dumbest thing you could do at this point. I mean, if that kid's not in the game, IU's down by 20, and whoever takes that shot doesn't make any difference. So I guess that would be my larger issue with it than that. But I tend to fall in your camp on this one, especially when you shouldn't be blaming the crowd for this when clearly it was Crean's fault. I don't understand how you're not getting on board with what the prevailing narrative is. This is really disappointing. Of anybody, I feel like doing the show, doing the podcast on the brink. I feel like you should really have your finger on the pulse well enough to know whose fault these things are and who is not to blame.
My opinion on this is there's only a limited number of times you will be at an Indiana game in your life. If you waste your time booing, you're a moron. And if you waste your time standing there in silence, you're also a moron. This is supposed to be such a big experience. I mean, you're a student. You get cheap tickets. You know how much I have to pay for tickets now? I mean, if you're there and you are not participating, you're a waste of space because there is somebody that is dying to be at that game and cheering their ass off, and you're just standing there. I mean, I've had people on Twitter who are at games say to me, "Oh, well, we'll cheer when they give us something to cheer about." No, that's not the deal. You cheer and you yell and you scream, and it helps lift the team. That's how it works.
Pick up your team when they're struggling. Yes.
Exactly. No, and you know what? They don't have this problem at Michigan State. When Michigan State's playing like crap, the crowd is still loud. Even Illinois, Wisconsin. Are you going to say those are better basketball schools? Hell no. Indiana's what it is, and you guys are supposed to be part of the solution, not pointing out the problem. So, if you don't like the coach, lift up the players.
I applaud both
Phillips
of you.
in 2016.
I applaud both of you. I think you're right.
Also, Andy was sorry, I don't mean to step in. Andy was completely right about Yogi too. Anybody booing Yogi Ferrell is completely missing the point. Like, it'd be one thing if they couldn't get the ball in on an inbounds or something like that, and you're frustrated. That's fine. Yogi Ferrell can shoot. He's earned the right to shoot whenever he damn well pleases.
Yeah, well, and they asked Matt Painter about it. He said if I was the coach, I wouldn't have a problem with that shot. So whatever that means for all those who think Matt Painter was the genius out there tonight. Anyway, interesting quote from Crean that I want to get to, and then we'll look ahead, and then we'll all go our separate ways, and Andy will do his stats analysis. Anybody who's not subscribed to the email list will go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. Get on the list so you start getting the emails. But an interesting comment from Crean, who said, so obviously he started Hunter Mascara-Perea tonight, and we talked about that, and Hunter came out and played well. It's funny he said this because I was just looking at the stat sheet and noticed that Hunter, despite his 10 points, only had 1 rebound. And rebounding has been such an important key for this team, but tonight it certainly wasn't. Purdue had a 50% offensive rebounding percentage, which is crazy. I mean, they rebounded 50% of their misses, 14 in total. Crean said, and apparently this is about Mascara-Perea in reference to him, at least based on the syntax of the tweet here from Alex Bozich, which is we're not going to move forward with 1 rebound in 17 minutes. So, perhaps even more than the foul trouble of Hunter, he did have 4 fouls. Part of the reason for him not playing quite as much was that he wasn't rebounding. And obviously he scored points, but frankly, if we're going to have one or the other from Hunter Mascara-Perea, we want rebounding instead of points because we can get points. But that's an interesting comment, and well, I mean, Andy, what do you think of that? Because I think rebounding has been so important for this team. I don't know that you want to overreact to a team that is that much bigger than you out rebounding you, but certainly, we lauded this team for positioning and attacking rebounds and doing such a good job against Minnesota, and the opponent will dictate some of that, but this team certainly didn't seem to show the same intensity on the glass that they had in that game.
Yeah, I mean, we had two guys that had more than rebound over the course of the game, and one of those guys is Yogi, who is under 6 feet tall. So at a certain point, yeah, obviously he's no good. But it is positioning, and it was a play toward the end of the game. I think I tweeted this out that if you're going to give up deep position, they gave it up to Haas. So Pere lets him get the ball like right next to the basket. He happens to miss, but he lets him get the rebound. I mean, pick one or the other. If you're going to let the guy get the ball wherever the hell he wants, at the very least you should be able to block him out and keep him from getting his own miss in the event that he does miss a layup, which is going to happen from time to time. So I think that's fair criticism, but I would also question if you're Crean, who are you going to put in? Are you going to put Hartman back in the lineup, who also had a rebound? Are you going to put in Holt, who had a rebound? It's not like there was a bunch of other guys who are like, man, if we really want rebounding, here's the guys that we can turn to. I mean, other than Jeremiah April, who obviously is the answer to IU's rebounding problems, but
one thing about Crean, he seems to go back and forth on Honor. Like, he'll praise him and call him out. Like, he's praising him in the pregame, calling him out in postgame. It seems like that's just kind of the thing with him.
He definitely is a frequent target of that kind of thing, it feels like, with him. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's not acceptable, but I also don't know who you turn to based on the performance tonight. So you then go back and default to who's playing, well in practice. And to a certain extent, a couple of the teams they got coming up, that becomes a bit less of an issue, with Rutgers and Northwestern up next. But, I agree that you can't have that, but it's not like anybody else outperformed him on the glass either. So, it's a fair point. My favorite, I'll let Ryan get to this in a minute, my favorite Crean quote was around the Octius dunk. That was not by design. Well, no kidding. Yeah, that was not by design. I didn't want to have Colin Hartman immortalized and nearly killed. This was not by design. We did not play this defense to allow a guy to drive 25 feet completely unencumbered to the basket where he dunked over somebody ridiculously. Yes, I feel like it should go without saying that it's not by design, because if those are the kinds of defenses that you are designing, then perhaps these people who are calling for him to be fired as of this moment are actually onto something.
There was a great shot. I think when Purdue went up by 3, when they just showed Crean just like chugging his Diet Coke on the sidelines. I thought they should have turned that into a commercial. Difficult moment. Not sure what to do next. Have a Diet Coke. Anyway,
that thing has to be laced with whiskey, right? I mean, we're pretty sure about that right now, right? At this point.
Well, Jameson. Let's honor Connor Hoosier. Should be some Jameson.
That Colin Hartman. I mean, dude. The guy's driving right at you. You're below.
No, he may actually need to change his name to Connor after that. You're right. I think he should change his name and pretend it never happened.
Yeah, just wear a mustache and glasses everywhere. And no, I don't know that. I'm his cousin. I don't know who. Yeah, no, I mean it's he disappeared. He's gone. But that, I mean, come on, dude. You cannot try and take a charge there. If you're on the train, if you're on the tracks and the train's going through, go up and just hammer the guy and make him shoot free throws, because that was just absurd. And I thought there were a couple times tonight. We know how much I hate when guys just dive in and try and take charges. Play some friggin' defense. Use the tools you have and try and play some defense. Even if you get beat like that, at least you get beat attempting something.
Alex McCarthy. I agree with you, Ryan, by the way. Alex McCarthy has a great tweet, and I'm a little upset, actually, that I missed this, because it probably should have been the banner moment. Do you realize that Indiana lost by 4, and we haven't even really mentioned Troy Williams? And in a lot of Indiana's losses this year, the first thing that we've said is, well, Troy didn't play very well. And tonight, as Alex McCarthy says, this is the 6th straight game that Troy has had at least 14 points and 7 rebounds. And that's exactly what he had tonight, actually. It was 14 points and 7 rebounds. It wasn't a great game by any means, but he played 36 minutes, only had a couple of turnovers, and they weren't great. But, he brought it, and I thought he rebounded well from that first game against Purdue, and we didn't have a lot of those damn it Troy moments where he just drove in and threw it off A.J. Hammond's elbow. I thought for the most part, despite a couple of bad shots, he played pretty well. Let's quickly discuss him because, again, we probably should have mentioned this before, but I think a game like good sign that the physicality of the game and the pace didn't totally take him out of it, and he found a way to contribute. And he found a way, he hit a floater and he hit a couple of layups driving to the basket. Like, he found ways to produce that he hasn't in other games like this. Andy, if you want to real quick touch on Troy, and then I don't even know who the hell we're playing, or we're playing Rutgers next. We'll look ahead, and then we'll get out of here because it's starting to get late.
How dare you overlook Rutgers? So, I did think Troy played well. I thought he had a couple of those moments. I'm just going to attempt to erase the three-point attempt from my memory entirely and not even think about that. But I did think there were certainly times down the stretch. I thought it was a lot of the same thing that we saw in some of those other games where, like, he and Yogi were really, doing the bulk of the work, and I thought he did a pretty good job. He took a couple jumpers. I think that was somewhat easy to foresee after he hit those few against Minnesota that he was going to take a couple more. But I thought overall, played within himself. Didn't really didn't take too many wild shots. There were a couple where he tried to flip the one back over his head in the first half, it felt like. But generally, I thought he played under control, led the team in rebounding, had 7 rebounds and had 3 assists and the 2 turnovers. And I think, with him, the way that he plays, if you're at 2 turnovers or less, you're probably feeling pretty good about what he's doing. I think, as we've talked about before, I think that's somewhat an inherent part of his game that is just going to be there pretty much no matter what. And I thought, they did a better job of trying to use him to attack Purdue in the way that they were defending him. I thought if they, got Hammonds on him, they tried to do a couple of different things where he would, try to take a ball screen and get into the lane. But I didn't think he really forced, a lot of shots. He missed 5 shots. One of those is the shot that I refuse to speak of anymore. And I thought overall he played really well and is really, rounding into a consistent form. And again, when you look at numbers like that, him being able to do that over that many games, one of the things we've talked about so often this season is that he really has become a guy that you have a better idea what you can expect. And that's been something that's been lacking over the team for a while. So I think another positive performance for him and one he can continue to move forward with over these last 4 games.
Ryan, any thoughts on Troy? Are you with us?
Yeah, no, I thought he played a solid game. It wasn't his best, wasn't his worst. I thought there were stretches where he played very well and made some nice plays, but it has to work in conjunction with other people stepping up as well, and that's when he's most effective. I thought that the baseline weave play between he, Yogi, and Stan was gorgeous, and I really wish there had been more of that. Maybe to move Hammonds around a little bit, but at times Troy really attacked hard and went right at Hammonds when he had him on him, and was able to finish plays and stuff. But again, we saw some boneheaded Troy plays like that 3 was just, why are you taking that? It's open, but that doesn't mean it's open for you. So against Minnesota, that's fine when you're up big and playing well, but coming from behind against Purdue, that's just a dumb shot. So hopefully he continues to round into form, and he's turning out to be a great player. He just needs to keep learning and keep building on it.
Let's go to some final thoughts. Andy, if you want to lead us off and maybe give us a quick scouting report on Rutgers, and if you would, please trend toward the positive so that we have something good to kind of leave with here. Oh, and I should say, I have a killer final thought coming up. It's not mine. Our number 1 fan, the person who has been with us longer than anybody else, has tweeted me some hot sports opinions, and I'm just going to straight up read them on the air, and you're not going to want to miss it. So let me preface final thoughts by saying that. Andy, lead us off, and maybe just a quick preview of Rutgers, which occurs Sunday.
Rutgers is not very good. There you go. That's pretty much the preview. I mean, they haven't won since they beat Wisconsin, which is still, despite whoever Wisconsin was missing, is one of the more startling results of the season and may end up being the biggest upset. Last I saw, they were getting crushed by Iowa, so they had that would be their 10th straight loss from that point, and really most of them have not been very close, although this is likely less than positive. One of the closest games in that stretch was when they lost by only 8 at IU. Other than that, they've other close games. They've lost by 8, 9, 4, 28, 10, 8, 12, 19, 10, and whatever Iowa's doing to them tonight. So this is a game that IU should win. It's another game that will really test truly how bad IU's defense is. Rutgers is dead last in the Big Ten in offensive efficiency, which is a great matchup for the team that is dead last in the league in defensive efficiency. So, this to me is a game that's important for a lot of reasons. One, to kind of get back on the winning track. Two, IU's only 3-7 in road games, and so when you start to look at NCAA tournament seeding and things like that, it becomes really important. Sometimes a road win, even against a team that's not very good, can really help your case. And if IU can take care of business in these last couple of road games, finishing 5-7 away from home is not awful. It isn't great, but it's not awful. So these are ones that you really have to win, or I think it starts to become an issue for their seeding. I mean, in terms of final thoughts, I honestly don't. I don't know that I have much else to say than what I said earlier. It is a disappointing game for a number of reasons. The defensive struggles continued. That's really nothing new at this point. I don't think any of us can be surprised by that at any point. For the team to at least battle back toward the end and be able to find a way to at least have a shot to win it, I think is I wouldn't say encouraging, but at least it's they didn't kind of lie down and really get run out of the place like they did at Purdue. Not that I expected that they would at home, but really, I guess one of the more disappointing games of the season, and maybe I say that because it's Purdue and that rivalry. I think it still means a lot to a lot of people, but I think as any kind of native Hoosier, that means quite a bit, and to be able to have gone 0-2 against them is pretty rough to swallow at this point. It was definitely a game I really thought IU would come out and just thought they would play better, quite honestly. And so a disappointing game. Can't hang their heads though, because they've got a couple road games coming up. Like I said, they're really important for their season, more from a seeding perspective than anything, and also from a seeding perspective in the Big Ten. Whether they can get one of those top 4 seeds at this point is still kind of up for grabs. But I would also say that the teams that are in their general area also have some tough games left. IU still has games against a game against Michigan State. I think Maryland still plays. They still play Wisconsin, so they can pick up another loss. So, and Purdue has a couple other tough road games. They go to Michigan State, to Ohio State later. So, all is not lost from a Big Ten seeding perspective, but IU certainly can't take any more losses and still hope to get into that top 4 seed range. So hopefully it's a case where they bounce back, somehow find a way to be better defensively and go from there. But I don't know too much else to say that we haven't probably already beaten into the ground on this one.
Oh, I have something. Ryan, how much culpability do we assign to Bill Belichick for deflating our offense?
Oh, it's all his fault. Any chance we can assign blame away from us and make us feel better? Oh, awesome. See, I think the team was disheartened by our little flap with Dan Dockich. They don't like seeing fighting in the Indiana family, and it's just it's really a sad thing to see. It's like they're the kids during the parents' divorce. They just they have to watch it and they can't do anything about it while mommy and daddy are arguing. Here's all
who's
I have
mommy,
to say.
who's daddy in that metaphor?
I think we all know who daddy is. There's not much. I hate losing to Purdue. I don't like Purdue. I don't like a lot of the kids on their team. I'm sure they're nice kids, but I just don't like them. I don't like the way they come across. I can't stand their fans at Mackey when they chant "IU sucks." You don't hear that at other arenas in the Big Ten. And it just comes across as bitter and stupid. And cheer your team. Boo boo things that go wrong for the other team, or things that they do like getting a technical or something like that. I'm fine with that, but it's just classless, and it really sucks to lose to them so much. God, it sucks. But you got to keep the season in perspective. Indiana beats Rutgers and Northwestern in the next week. It's 20 wins for the season. It's 10 in the Big Ten. That's somewhere we all would have loved to have been at the beginning of this season. So keep that in perspective. Indiana needs to go Sunday, take care of business in New Jersey, and then come back, take care of business in Evanston, and they'll be right where they need to be heading into the final week of the season.
So, if you're new to watching the show, number one, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We started the show 4 years ago, not really having any idea what it was going to be, how long we were going to do it, what was going to happen. But the three of us just loved IU, wanted there to be a post-game show, and decided to start this show. And there are a few people who became really consistent fans of our show early on. And we forever appreciate those people because without them and without just the passion and the trust that they gave to us to come here after every game, we would not still be here. And so we are eternally thankful to them. And when those people say that they have something to say, we will read every single word that they have to say because they've earned it. And one of those people is at @TaxMegan on Twitter, Megan Mahaffey. If she wants to say anything, she can have this floor for a whole 60 minutes after a show, or after a game, if she wants to. She's earned that. So she said, I have so many things to say here, so many things, #screwed out of tickets when we started talking about the whole ticket fan thing. And I'm just going to read her tweets because, frankly, I think she makes some good points, and I think it's something everybody needs to hear. So, as she says, during the Davis era, season ticket holders who previously had seats in lower level were pushed out for the student expansion. My fam had held lower-level seats for 20-plus years. Mom missed 3 games in that period. The assumption that quote-unquote old people are not fans and do not yell and cheer for our team pisses me off. IU alienated solid lifetime fans for kids with no clue, up to and including former players. This is Megan Mahaffey talking. I was part of a social media outcry when they tried to take Archie D's seats. This old people effing up, fed up by these panty-ass kids. #curmudgeon. My blood pressure may be elevated a bit, she says. She says, I take issue with IU fans who boo in the hall. I take issue with empty seats. I really hate, quote-unquote, stand-up old people, and I agree. And I don't know what the answer is to this, to the lackluster crowds and to that kind of thing. And it's really hard for me to say and pass any type of judgment on not being there. I don't like that, not being there and trying to judge from TV. But when I have people whose opinion I respect, who go to games, who are there, who tell me this kind of stuff, it does disappoint me a little bit. And I don't know what the answer is, but I certainly don't think that, pushing fans like Megan and her family out of seats that they've had for a long time is ever going to be the answer. So whatever it is, I think this is something that, because I think when you have teams that struggle, you can kind of understand a little bit of fan apathy. But this seems to me like the first time where we've really had a team that is good and is competing for an upper division spot in the Big Ten, and the fans just don't seem to be quite responding to them. And I don't know. I don't get it, and I hope that it's something that the athletic department looks at, and if changes need to be made, I hope that they're made. But, Megan, I thought you made good points. I appreciate you being so candid. I hope you don't mind me reading all of them on there. But that's my final thought, other than the fact that Indiana loses 67-63 to Purdue, and it sucks. But, even though the 2 losses to Purdue hurt more than the other ones, they're still just 2 losses, and Indiana sits at 18-9. 8-6 in the conference, still with a really good shot to finish, 11-7 in the conference, and that's even with one of these other games being losses where we are favored, where we have the higher probability. So, if you are on the fire crane, sky is falling, everything's going to hell camp, I would say just relax for a second. Let's see how this team does against Rutgers. If we come out and lay an egg against Rutgers and play really badly, then you'll see some overreaction here, I guarantee you. Not even overreaction, then it would be warranted reaction. But I would caution you against overreacting for tonight. Not a good performance by any means, not anything to be happy about. But let's stick with these guys. They've done a good job this year of coming back from tough losses and picking themselves back up, and I'm hoping that's what they'll be able to do against Rutgers. Crap, I forgot to get picks. So let's close real quick with picks. Is anybody picking Rutgers? Andy, you can just shake your head if you want to.
No, I'm not picking Rutgers.
Like you really need to take picks this time, Jerod.
Will's going to be asking. He's watching right now. Hey, Will, thanks for being up late. We appreciate it.
I'm taking Indiana.
All right, we're all taking the Hoosiers. Okay, Will, we're all taking the Hoosiers. Get your pick 'em in. Thank you to everybody for watching. Again, it's assemblycall.com/subscribe. We send an email out the morning after every single game. Andy is getting ready to go get to work on that right now. If you would like updates on USC football, please feel free to follow at Rumors and Rants, and you'll be able to get those. Or if you want to debate net neutrality, send a tweet to at Rumors and Rants. I'll be happy to discuss that topic with you. I'm your host, Jerod Morris, and we'll talk to you Sunday night after IU Rutgers. Laughter makes the losses go down smoother. I'm telling you. Try and find a way. All right, everybody. Have a good night. We'll talk to you later.